What concerns you the most about the 2023 Buffalo Bills? We're breaking that down on today's episode of TWB.
You are now listening to the Watering Buffalo podcast with your hosts, Justin Goddard and Andrew Chang.
Welcome in, everybody, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Watering Buffalo podcast, a show here on the Buffalo FAMBase network. I'm your host, Two Changs, and today we are going to talk about what concerns us as Bills Mafia the most about the 2023 Buffalo Bills. We recently put out a post on social media asking you, the fans, what were your biggest concerns, and you guys did not disappoint. You filled up the comment sections with tons of valid points. And of course, as soon as I'm about to start recording this episode, I hear some interesting news that DeAndre Hopkins has been released by the Arizona Cardinals. But before we get into today's episode, I'd like you to subscribe, review, and check out the Buffalo FAMBase as well as this podcast, which you can find on all social media platforms and all audio platforms, and of course on YouTube. All right, without further ado, let's just jump in, and I'll quickly kind of go over, I say quickly, but I'll probably talk about it a lot more, about the DeAndre Hopkins situation. We've had this conversation in the past, as I just mentioned, but I'm going to really get into the weeds today. Like I mentioned, Nuke got released today from the Cardinals. It's Friday, the 26th, and I did not see that coming. All signs pointed that he was going to stay with the Cardinals and just ride it out with Kyler Murray, and then he gets released. So, yeah, that throws a wrench into things, if you ask me. And what's really awesome is that you can sign him now off the streets, right? You don't have to haggle with the Cardinals about trade compensation. No more talking about what the Bills have to give up to get DeAndre Hopkins. No more, hey, let's trade Ed Oliver to get DeAndre Hopkins. No more, hey, let's trade a second. No. It's over. He is still a very good receiver. And he only played 9 games last year, right? He missed 6 because he got suspended for PDs. And then he missed the last 2 games, which I'm not really sure what the reason was. Maybe it was injury related. Hard to say, but the Cardinals were way out of the running at that point. So they probably were just like, meh. And not to mention Kyler Murray was out. But even with that in mind, that he only played in 9 games, he caught 64 catches on 96 targets for 717 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's an average of 11.2 yards per reception. That's still pretty productive. And he was getting production from guys like, oh my God, Colt McCoy? Am I wrong there? Colt McCoy still out here tossing the pigskin? And DeAndre Hopkins was still getting his. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Von Miller, he's been actively trying to recruit people on this team. He's doing his job again as the Bills' GM or secondary GM, because we know Von wants to be a GM one day, by trying to get Nuke Hopkins on this team. He did the same thing with OBJ, and, well, it didn't work out with OBJ, but now he's got his eyes on Hopkins. And Deion Dawkins messaged him too. Well, not messaged him, but publicly put out there like, hey, Nuke, there's an open locker right next to me. We could be buddies. It's great. It's just so cool to see how much pull that this team is trying to do, or how much effort they're trying to do to corral in Nuke Hopkins. Now, I've talked about the good stuff about Nuke, but I do have concerns, right? And one of them is that he's 30 years old. I'm 30 years old. I don't feel like a spring chicken anymore, and I'm not comparing myself to Nuke Hopkins, but I definitely felt differently if you told me like, hey, I was like 25 as opposed to now, things hurt a lot more. And I'm just an average person. This is a like elite NFL wide receiver. So I assume he can, he probably is built different, if you know what I'm talking about with the egg thing. He's built different compared to me. Much different. But he's, like I said, he's still a top tier athlete and arguably one of the best wide receivers when healthy in the NFL. But let's say the Bills sign him, he would immediately become the oldest wide receiver in the room. And speaking of like age of the wide receiver room, let's talk about that real quick. Stephon Diggs, 29 years old. He's going to be 30 by the end of this season. Deontay Hardy, 25 years old. Gabe Davis, 24 years old. Excuse me. Khalil Shakir, 23 years old. And Trent Sherfield, 27 years old. The room's kind of getting older, right? Do we really need another old guy in there? I don't know. But it would be really cool to get Nuke Hopkins. And then there's the question, is there room for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins? That's a valid question, and something I can't believe I'm actually questioning right now, but like, how many wide receivers are the Bills going to keep? I personally think they're probably going to keep like maybe 5 or 6. Last year, for the good part, they ran with 5, had some practice call-ups with Cole Beasley and John Brown, Smoke Brown, but I don't know. Like, if they run with 5, who are you going to keep? Diggs? Davis? Nuke Hopkins? And then maybe Shakir? And then you have Hardy and Sherfield battling it out for that 5th spot? And not to mention there's other wide receivers on the roster right now, but I'm not counting them because I just don't see a path for them to make the team. It's a good problem to have. And I think it's a good safe assumption if the Bills were to sign DeAndre Hopkins, he immediately becomes wide receiver 2. So Gabe Davis gets pushed down to wide receiver 3. Then you got Hardy, Shakir, and Sherfield battling it out for wide receiver 4 and potentially 5. One of them would probably either be a healthy scratch or maybe not even make the roster, which is kind of crazy. I don't think any of them would be. I take that back. I think all of them would make the roster, but one of them would probably be a healthy scratch. And what about this Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox equation thing that we have going on? And you're probably thinking, hey, Andrew, we're talking about wide receivers. Why are we bringing in the tight ends into this? Well, the general consensus is that by the Buffalo Bills drafting Dalton Kincaid, that they were looking to shift more from an 11 personnel to a 12 personnel, or 11.5 if you ask Brandon Beane. So 2 tight ends on the field. Assuming that that's what the Bills are shifting towards, then you really only have 3 other spots left on the field for wide receivers and running back. 5 for the linemen, 1 for Josh, 2 for Dawson Knox and Kincaid, then Diggs, Hopkins, and then you have 1 more spot for a wide receiver or a running back. Who's that going to be? There's been a strong emphasis for the Buffalo Bills to get the running game on the road. Is it James Cook? Is it Damian Harris? Is it Trent Sherfield? Hardy? Is it another lineman, Jumbo? I just generally don't know. And these are the legit questions I've been asking myself since this news broke. How is this going to work? And if this were to happen, this would be an amazing problem to have. Again, it would be so cool to have this problem. But he's got other suitors. Let's be honest. On Brandon Marshall's I Am an Athlete podcast, Hopkins says he wants to go to a team that has 3 criterias: a stable front office, check for the Buffalo Bills. A great defense, check. Von's still out, but, no, I'm going to say maybe check. Von Miller's still out, and the middle linebacker situation is questionable, but McDermott's back there, and he's got a proven track record. So I'm going to say check, ? And then number 3 is a QB that loves the game and brings everyone on board. Hella check. Blue check mark on Twitter check. Great things. But he also lists in order, these are the quarterbacks that he wants, or he lists that like, hey, if I had to play for another team, this is how I would do it. It would be Josh Allen, well, in the order that he listed it, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and then Justin Herbert. Those are the players that he listed. And then I guess one of the final things we have to talk about is the money. It's always great to talk about getting all these players, but it has to make sense financially. Brandon Beane has been known that he can get creative, but he's also been known and on record saying, like, yeah, I could just pull all these levers and like sign these players, push all of our chips into the table for 1 year, but then we're going to have to do a full teardown. And he's trying to keep the Bills from doing that. He wants to keep this window of competitiveness open for as long as possible. Sustain success, I believe, is what they said. So I don't know how many contracts he would be willing to restructure in order to bring a guy like Nuke Hopkins on board, but I'll kind of give you a breakdown of the salary cap situations for each of those teams that I just mentioned with those quarterbacks. So the Bills have $1.4 to $1.5 million in cap space right now. Just right now. Not talking about next year, right now. The Chiefs have $652,000 right now. So the Bills are ahead of them. And then this is where things get a little disappointing. The Eagles have $13.4 to $13.5 million, number 1 on that list. Number 2 in money bags is the Chargers with $12.7 to $12.8 million. And then finally, the Ravens at $11.7 to $11.8 million. So basically the top 3 money bags are the Eagles, Ravens, and Chargers, and they basically have 10 times the amount that the Buffalo Bills have right now. I don't know, but they have more money, but who actually needs Hopkins? What do you think? What do you personally think as a fan out of those teams? Who do you think needs DeAndre Hopkins the most? I think the Ravens probably need him more, and they have the more money right now. Maybe the Chargers, Keenan Allen's getting up there, and he's kind of expensive, and I think they were toying with the idea of potentially cutting him or trading him or something like that, or maybe I'm imagining things. But this DeAndre Hopkins thing is such a Rubik's Cube of a problem, and it's like one of those things where you can't really figure it out until you figure it out, but you still mess with it. It's just fun to talk about. All right, we got to talk about your biggest concerns. We're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Bills Vader. Now back to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for joining me on another episode of the Wandering Buffalo Podcast, a show here on the Buffalo FAMBase. You can find me on social media by searching up 2 Changs, and this podcast by searching up the Wandering Buffalo Podcast. All right, so we put a post out there on Thursday, the 25th, asking you, the fans, what your biggest concerns were for the 2023-2024 Buffalo Bills. And like I mentioned before, you did not disappoint. All valid and really, really valid concerns, and they kind of gives you a good idea of how us, the Buffalo Bills fans, view are Achilles heels for this team. And I'm going to try my best to ease some of those thoughts for you. And I'm going to list this from the most prevalent comments that I saw to the least prevalent, but there were a good amount of comments on there, and it's not like one blew one out of the other out of the water. There was a lot of similar themes going on here. And the number one thing is staying healthy. And I'll say this right now, you cannot predict health. You can't. You can be preventative as much as possible by stretching and eating well and like doing the right exercises, but at the end of the day, football is a physically demanding sport, which causes you to exert a lot of force on your joints and like change of direction, and your body necessarily isn't supposed to do some of the things that they want you to do, and the most freakish athletes out there are doing incredible things, bending their bodies in like certain ways that make my knees hurt. But it's just something you can't predict, right? And the Bills have historically been a really healthy team before last season. The shit hit the fan. There's no other way to say it, right? But even though players went down one after another and another, the Bills still went 13-3. I'm going to say that again. Through all the injuries that the Buffalo Bills sustained during the last season, the Bills still went 13-3 in the regular season. Moreover, they won the division and won a playoff game. I guess what I'm trying to say to you as Bills fans is that you can only control what you can control, and the Bills are handling what they can control very well, in my opinion. And they're doing a damn good job. It's honestly really, really impressive, and it just goes to show that they're doing everything they can to prevent injuries, like the preventative health stuff like stretching, and they talk about the cold chambers and the workout facilities and the mental health stuff too. It's amazing. It's amazing. And we saw the response that this team has put on since the Damar Hamlin thing. That stuff, wave of change for the whole NFL and for us as normal folk too. I know a bunch of people who got CPR certified after watching what happened on TV. It's really good to see that, and just outside the Buffalo Bills and outside of football, that people are doing things to prevent injury or tragedies. It's just awesome. But like I said, you can't predict injuries in the NFL, so let's not lose sleep on it. The second most popular concern, which was very, very popular, almost tying for staying healthy, was coaching. And we got to talk about Ken Dorsey. Oh, Ken Dorsey. The concerns. He's not creative. He's got no running game. He can't adjust. And there's a lack of it. Lack thereof it. He's a first-year coordinator. And I'm going to say this again. The Bills went 13-3, won the division, and won a playoff game with Ken Dorsey as their offensive coordinator. So let me give you some reasons to be optimistic. He's going into his second year. He can't possibly get worse. You know what he put out his first year. So if anything, he's going to learn from that and adapt and hopefully get better. If not, well, then we might have to part ways. But we don't know. So how can we know? We don't. And I looked up some stats. The Bills had the second most total offense last year. And that was his first year as the Bills' offensive coordinator. It's pretty good. Not to mention, he's got more upgrades and additions this year as opposed to last year. And I'm just going to kind of go over some of this stuff because We'll talk about some of those other concerns later, but interior offensive line, which I'll touch upon in just a moment. Then you look at the weapons. Sherfield, probably better than Kumaro and can push for offensive snaps, like legitimate offensive snaps. We heard that he was taking some Z snaps during OTAs because Stephon Diggs wasn't there, right? Deontay Hardy is greater than McKenzie. That's just true. There's no arguing that. Shakir is going into his second season and started getting more work towards the end of last season, so I feel good about his trajectory and his experience that he's going to get. And then you got the additions of other players like Dalton Kincaid and Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. This is honestly a better team on offense than last year. I personally think so. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, let's give this guy some grace. If he delivers the same results as he did last year with better weapons, then this becomes a legit. It's not a concern anymore. It's a problem. But we don't know. We only got 1 year of data from him. Let's see what he can do in the second year. The other concern about coaching was how much is on Sean McDermott's plate, right? Is it going to be too much for Coach McDermott to be the head coach as well as the defensive coordinator and the signal caller? He hasn't coached defense in a while. That's legit. He hasn't. But let me tell you why you shouldn't necessarily be too worried about it. And that's because he was hired by the Buffalo Bills because he was an extremely successful defensive coordinator, and he's been known to be very, very aggressive. That's very good. Well, I guess maybe not very good, but like it's a refreshing change of pace, because when you think about the Bills defense when it was ran under Leslie Frazier, I think it was too soft, and it definitely curled up in big moments. We played a lot of soft zone. I don't think we're going to do that much this year. I think the Bills are going to go after it on defense. He's giving more, and also he's giving more responsibility, divvying out defensive coordinator, responsibilities to other coaches that can help them excel and get better at their positions, like his buddy John Butler and Al Holcomb. So it's not just on Sean McDermott to run the defense. He's got buddies. He's got a whole entire defensive staff behind him. Everyone's going to put in the work, and those guys that I just mentioned are proven commodities that McDermott has history with and definitely trusts. So it's kind of encouraging to know that they're getting the opportunity. His third most commented concern was about the offensive line. Woo! This one feels like I'm beating a dead horse. But it's valid. It's valid. We got to protect Josh Allen. That was the big issue last year. It's like Josh was running with his hair on fire. Josh had pressure all up in his face. And then we did nothing at right tackle during the offseason. What are the Bills going to do? What are we going to do with Spencer Brown? Well, what the Buffalo Bills is that they loaded up on interior offensive line help. We got David Edwards, Connor McGovern, which is better than Roger Saffold, no doubt about it. We got Osiris Torrance, who's probably going to push Ryan Bates to the bench, who was your starter last year, who, mind you, can play all 5 positions, so he's depth everywhere. Tommy Doyle is coming off an ACL tear. We don't know what he's going to be like because he only played like 2 games, and he could be solid depth. And then you added late round picks like Nick Broker and Richard Garage. You might not like it, but this team believes in Spencer Brown. And I know you've heard this before, but he didn't have a regular offseason last year. It was back surgery, and then jump right into camp, and then start the game in LA to face the defending NFL Super Bowl champs. That's hard. And I think that this season we're going to see that third year jump that we normally see from Bills players who are drafted but from, Spencer Brown, because, he didn't really have off season. So I think he's going to really develop this time around. So I would like keep a cautious eye on it, but this unit should be much better in my opinion. So I'm really excited about that. And then your last concern, the defensive line. Whew, I share your concerns about this, and I really do. It is something it felt harder for me to make you, the fans, feel more optimistic about it. And your concerns are very valid. Again, it's straightforward. The pass rush is ass without Von Miller. I hear you. And it was a big concern for me too, as I mentioned, and it still is. We have second and first round picks littered on the edge, and they have produced next to nothing. It makes you kind of wonder what's going on. Like, geez, but we've seen what this team looks like with Von Miller on there, and their defensive line gets pressure with just 4. It was amazing. It really was. And then they could just place soft zone in the back end, and then things were great. But Von Miller's not there. But as I mentioned before, Sean McDermott is now running the defense. I don't think that the Bills are going to be doing things like Leslie Frazier, as I mentioned. I think they're going to do things much differently, and I think McDermott's going to put these players in the right positions so they can excel. Now, more reasons for optimism is that Von guaranteed that he's going to be back before or on week 6, so that New York Giants game. It's really not that bad. Now, he also guaranteed that he was going to be back before the Jets game last year, and then we found out he tore his ACL, and then, he was out for the rest of the year. So maybe not put a whole lot of stock into that, but I also saw this man do a Bulgarian split squat with 100 pounds in each of his hands, which is kind of absurd to me when you have a partially repaired leg. That's just wild for me. Another reason is that Ed Oliver is going into a contract year, and that typically correlates with more production because he's trying to get the bag. So good. I hope you're watching this, Ed Oliver. The Bills Mafia is watching. Brandon Beane is watching. If you want to go get your money, go out there and get it, man. You know it's out there. You see what all these other D tackles from your draft class are getting. That could be you. But you got to show out and prove it. And that can only benefit the Bills and you. So let's see it. Poona Ford, free agent signing. Love that pick. You got to be excited about that depth, right? AJ Epinesa. And AJ Epinesa, I'm pretty sure he's going into contract year. I might be wrong about that. But regardless, he needs to prove himself, very similar to the Ed Oliver pick, if he is going to get the bag in the offseason or get somewhat of a bag. What do you have, 6 sacks last season? Do that, maybe a little bit more, and you'll probably get north of $10 million. NFL loves to pay sacks, so go out there and get it. And then Boogie Basham has another year of experience under his belt, and yet has he shown us his ceiling yet? I don't know. And I guess that's the reason for optimism, is that I don't think we've seen his floor, but I don't think we've seen his ceiling. So I'm not going to be too low on a guy like Boogie Basham. I just need to see more before I can be sure, right? So there it is. Those are concerns. Again, the concerns were staying healthy, coaching, specifically Ken Dorsey, Sean McDermott's plate, offensive line, and defensive line. You guys killed it with the comments. I appreciate everything that you've done. We're going to get out of here, but I just want to say thank you for participating in that, post of ours. You can find this podcast on most social media and podcasting platforms, and of course on YouTube. And again, we're on the Buffalo FAMBase Network. come check us out. We got other great content creators on there, and we also have our website. So please check that out. I appreciate you listening, and if you could drop a like, comment, or review, be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and as always, go Bills.